I'm really delighted to see so many of Josh and Rebecca's friends here. And you are old enough to hear the kinds of things that I'm going to talk about now, not easy things. But if you feel that instead you want to make your way to the youth lounge on the 3rd floor, you're welcome to do that. And Rabbi McCarroll and Rabbi Baruchel can show you the way. There are moments in human history so bleak that it seems God would be justified in washing it clean and starting again, a clean slate. But God has promised, with the covenant of a rainbow, never again to wash away the wicked. What remains for humankind, then, is the painfully slow story of righteousness struggling towards the surface of the deep. Our Torah portion introduces us to Noah. Noach ish tzadik tamim haya b'dorotav. Noach was a righteous man, blameless in his time. Tamim can mean blameless, flawless, even pure, but it can also mean innocent, simple, or simple-minded. Our sages, the rabbis, are critical of Noah for his simplicity. Because our world is complicated, we cannot afford to be simple-minded. Midrash Tanchuma tells it like this: once the waters had abated, Noah should have left the ark immediately. But Noah said to himself, I entered the ark at God's command, and when God said, go into the ark, I went into the ark, and so now I cannot leave without God's permission, without God's instruction. And so the rabbis imagine that the Holy One, blessed be God, said to Noah then, are you waiting for my permission? Very well then, I permit you, get out of the ark. Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eli comments on this scene, imagining his own response, his own leadership style, his own capacity for humanity against the backdrop of the flood and the ark and all that was witnessed. Rabbi Yehuda said, if I had been there on the ark, I would have broken down the door and taken everyone out. This was Noah's downfall. His purity, his innocence, his simplicity made him worth saving, but it made him unable to save others. Maharat Dr. Aaron Lieb writes, the moral hero does not wait to be granted permission to take action. She seizes it. She steps out away from the shelter toward shaky ground because that is where the work needs to be done. That is where the rebuilding needs to take place. Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eli says, if I had been there, I would have broken down the door of the ark to take myself out. Courage sometimes means breaking down a few walls in order to save a broken world. Noah saved only himself, proves in his demise that to save only yourself is not even to save yourself. So one of the essential questions which emerges from our parsha and from the news of the day is, when the world is coming undone, how must one respond? When righteousness is mocked and justice is denied, is blamelessness enough? Or is another kind of courage required of us? Another kind of initiative? Another kind of imagination, even without first being given permission? Good people, this is the question of the day. How does humanity keep from losing our humanity now? Hamas is an Arabic acronym which stands for 3 words meaning Islamic Resistance Movement, but to the Hebrew speaker's ear, we hear the word which is by chance first introduced in our Torah portion. The Hebrew word Hamas appears 6 times in the Torah, first here, to describe the condition of the world before the flood, the state of humanity which made God regret making humankind in the first place. There it is written, the earth became corrupt before God. The earth was filled with Hamas. The earth was filled with violent lawlessness. And when God saw how corrupt the earth was, for all flesh had corrupted its ways on earth, God said, because of them, I am about to destroy the earth. What has transpired since Hamas unleashed upon the Jewish people the deadliest day of violent lawlessness since the Holocaust? I admit that these 2 weeks have felt like 2 months for me, for you too, I'm sure. Last Shabbat, we were like the Onain. We were like people who had already heard the news of death, but were not yet able to receive comfort because we had not yet buried our dead. This Shabbat, we are more like mourners who have returned from the cemetery and taken off our shoes in the Shiva home. We sit on low chairs, bent with grief. Last Shabbat was overwhelming shock. This Shabbat, like Avelim, like mourners, we are beginning to understand the magnitude of the losses. We are just beginning to comprehend what it means that 1,400 of our sisters and brothers were slaughtered in their homes at a music festival while heroically defending one another. We are just now beginning to see that life will never be the same again. Like mourners, we will forever mark time by this moment. There will be the before and the after. Things we thought were true are either no longer true or no longer seem to be true. Like mourners, we feel ourselves disoriented, off balance, on shaky ground. The waters are rising about us, and we have been set adrift. So God instructed Noah to build a window in the ark and a skylight. A window to navigate by day according to the horizon, a skylight to orient by night according to the stars. How are we reorienting ourselves and our world now? It isn't easy. We must be on the lookout, on the horizon. We must be on the lookout for any stars that might navigate the way. Like getting up for Shiva, all of that comfort and togetherness is dissipating, and it's time now to adjust to the world outside. One thing that happens for mourners, and you may know this from your own experience, is that during Shiva there is a shifting of categories. A wife begins to consider herself a widow. A child, no matter how old, begins to consider himself an orphan. Parents begin to consider themselves childless or with one less child. It is a painful shifting of identities, and we resist this change. Let it be a bad dream. Let it all be a mistake. Let it have been for someone else. Healthy grief sees us through at least those 5 stages. This week, those 5 stages of grief have been known by Israelis and diaspora Jews alike. We've experienced them all: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So what are the changes that we must be on the lookout for? What do we see on the horizon? How do we navigate our way now? What hard truths have been disclosed? What ugly things have been exposed? I'll name just 3 things that I believe have changed, and 2 things that I hope will never change. One change is that this invasion was for the first time an invasion of Israeli sovereign soil, a breach of her borders. The enemy came into our homes. One of my Israeli cousins said, "We thought we knew this enemy, but we were wrong." And so the status quo can no longer be ignored, not in Israel proper, not in Gaza, not in the West Bank. What is true for Israel's leadership is true for the leadership of the West Bank and Gaza as well. There must be changes. Israelis are clear that once Hamas is defeated, and they have no choice about that, then comes the hard work of recasting leadership across the board. Israel cannot and must not do this alone. I do not know what will be, but I know that October 7th demands change. Israelis and Palestinians all deserve better. Number two, another thing that has changed. For us here in the diaspora, we have witnessed public calls of violence against Jews, and I refuse to repeat them in this sacred place on this sacred day. But they are no longer spoken in whispers. They are no longer hiding on the dark web. They are coming into full voice, even on the streets of Toronto, this great and good city. And so we have to decide. We have to decide if we are going to let terrorists terrorize. Are we going to be spooked out of our daily living? Will we find courage to live our lives as Jews? Last Friday, when there was that call for a day of rage, police said to us, "Go about your daily lives. Be vigilant, yes, but go about your daily lives." And nevertheless, our Jewish schools were 1/3 full, 2/3 empty. Thank God the following Monday they were full again. We found our way, we found our courage, we found our feet. I spent Monday and Tuesday of this week in Ottawa at a conference on combating anti-Semitism, and we learned about data, and we learned about resources, we learned about allyship and leadership. I didn't know how necessary all of those organizations were for combating anti-Semitism in Canada until the events of the last 2 weeks. My eyes are also opened in new ways. A third thing that we have learned, something that must change, is that there has been a pattern of insult to injury. Too many are not clearly denouncing the terrorism of Hamas. You've read what I've read about university statements, about workplace statements, about decisions made by the TDSB, messages coming or not coming from faith leaders of all stripes. Some of those statements are evidence to me that we are losing our way. We have lost a kind of moral clarity. So this is a time to demand more from anyone and everyone in a position of leadership, including those of us here. In our corners of the world, we each have a role to play. We have to decide if we're going to keep our heads down and let injustice wash over us, or if we are going to speak up and demand better. Tomorrow, we'll be offering a gathering for students and parents who are attached to the public schools in Toronto. If you're looking for guidance about how to support your children, if you're looking for guidance about how to talk to your classmates, how to talk to your teachers, this is a good place to come and be reinforced. We're also sending resources to our university students who are in many ways on the front lines of truth-telling now. And so many congregants are asked to make statements or provide workshops in their workplaces, and that can be a heavy burden when you're not sure what to say or how to organize. And so we have resources to share with you as well. Please call on us. We can help you to walk more confidently. And I'll share with you that Wednesday night I attended 2 meetings back to back with Muslim leaders. The first one was 5 rabbis and 5 imams. And it was hard, I'll admit to you. We were really stretching, every one of us in the room, to really listen, to really hear the other. And while we didn't get too far, we did decide to meet again on Monday. And that is something. That isn't nothing. We acknowledge that we cannot influence what happens elsewhere, but we can influence what happens right in our own communities, right in our own small corners of the world, and so we are not letting go of that responsibility. Let me name 2 things that I hope will not change, will never change. That is the spirit of Israelis and the spirit of the Jewish people that I know here. In Israel, people are opening their homes to take in the homeless from the Israeli communities along Gaza. They're opening their homes to take in those who have been evacuated from their homes along the northern border. They are mobilizing, they are organizing, they are driven by love and generosity. And I hope you've seen what I've seen, glimpses of many weddings and many babies being born, and soldiers being given permission to come back from the front so that they can stand under the chuppah, so that they can hold their new babies. This is because we are a life-intoxicated people, a life-affirming people. And yes, the call for the reservists has been met by 140%. People who were not called up are volunteering. And so we should take our cues from the unity in Israel today. And then there's us, the capacity to be confident in who we are, in what we stand for, and what we will not stand for. Our greatest security is found not in building up our synagogues and schools to be like fortresses, but in building up our Jewish identities and the identities of our children and grandchildren. Our greatest security is found when leaning into our Judaism, recommitting ourselves to Jewish ritual in the home, to Jewish deeds and Jewish learning. Security and comfort are found when gathering together like this, to celebrate Shabbat, to lift up our voices in songful prayer, to celebrate 2 young people, Josh and Rebecca, who have come to take their place at the Torah, to take their place among their people. This is exactly how we grow stronger. This is exactly how we draw comfort from one another. And one more, that I hope that we will either hold on to or learn for the first time. That is how we can be expansive in our prayers. Surely we can include the innocent people of Gaza in our prayers. Surely there is room enough in our prayers for the children who make up 40% of the population of Gaza. Let us learn from Noah, who was, yes, righteous in his time, that to save only yourself is not even to really save yourself. The peace-loving Israelis who choose to make their homes along the Gaza border knew this. Among them were Mr. and Mrs. Lifshitz, a journalist and an artist, well into their 80s. They volunteered to drive Gazans from the checkpoint to Israeli hospitals so that they might receive medical treatment. And then they would return them safely to the border. Again and again and again they did this. And today they are among the 210 abducted in Gaza. May God watch over and protect them all. Look up for a moment and see how this structure was built. A member of our congregation who grew up here was born and raised into this congregation, she told me that when she was a child, she would look up at this ceiling with its wooden beams, and she thought to herself, it looks like the hull of a ship. So let this sanctuary be an ark, sturdy enough to protect us from the winds of war and the storms of life. Let this sanctuary be an ark, large enough to hold all our prayers, generations of prayers. Let the sanctuary be an ark, imposing enough and quiet enough to inspire prayers that may be blocked, to uplift prayers that may be weighed down with grief and inherited trauma. Let the sanctuary be beautiful enough to release prayers not yet fully formed, but longing to be vocalized, maybe in song, maybe in the spoken word, maybe in silence, but finally offered to the Holy One who delights in our prayers, no matter how messy they are, no matter how simple they are, no matter how angry they are, no matter how rare they are. God speaks to us through the prophet Isaiah, saying, "This day is like the day of Noah for me. I promised then never again to cover the earth with the waters of Noah's day. And so now I promise never again to be so angry with you, to wash it all away. And even though the mountains may crumble and the hills may fall apart, my love will never depart from you. My covenant of shalom will never be removed." So says the one who loves you, the Eternal One. Baruch atah Adonai zocher habrit. Praised are you, Eternal God, who remembers the covenant made after the flood. Amen.